President Trump says the United States needs Greenland for international security. The president insisting that the U.S. must control the semi-autonomous Danish territory.
Mark, we need that for international security, not just security, international. Greenland for national security and even international security, and we're working with everybody involved to try and get it. But we need it really for international world security.
Donald Trump's ambition to buy Greenland was one of the strangest geopolitical stories in modern history. It started as a headline many laughed at, a U.S. president demanding to purchase a vast icy territory belonging to Denmark. But what began as a punchline has turned into a global chess match with enormous consequences for the future of the Arctic, the balance of power between nations, and America's own security. Because while Trump's Greenland move blew up in his face, it has given rise to something Washington never wanted to see: a growing alliance between Canada and Denmark, two northern powers quietly reshaping the Arctic and gaining the upper hand. Subscribe now to Traveling Vibes, where we take you behind the headlines, deep into the stories shaping America's future. Think about this for a moment. Greenland is not just a block of ice. It is the world's largest island, rich in resources, strategically located between North America and Europe, and home to rare earth minerals, the very same minerals powering the technologies of tomorrow, from fighter jets to smartphones to satellites. The U.S. military already operates an airbase there, Thule Air Base, which is critical for missile defense and space surveillance. To Trump, owning Greenland wasn't a joke. It was a serious, almost desperate attempt to secure America's Arctic future. But here's where the story takes a turn. Denmark, which oversees Greenland, flat out rejected Trump's offer. The Danish Prime Minister called the idea absurd. Greenland's leaders themselves were offended, treating Trump's proposal as an insult to their sovereignty. Trump, furious at being embarrassed, canceled a planned state visit to Denmark. For him, the move was meant to show strength. Instead, it backfired, making America look clumsy, out of touch, and increasingly isolated on the world stage. While the headlines mocked Trump, behind the scenes Canada and Denmark were paying close attention. Both countries had long-standing disputes over Arctic boundaries. They once bickered over a tiny rock in the Arctic Ocean called Hans Island. But suddenly, with America's clumsy Greenland bid, both nations saw an opportunity. An opportunity to strengthen ties, to present themselves as responsible Arctic stewards, and to quietly check U.S. ambitions in the region. By 2022, Denmark and Canada resolved their century-long dispute over Hans Island peacefully, splitting the territory down the middle. What looked like a small symbolic gesture actually meant a lot more. It showed the world that these two northern nations could cooperate, could lead, and could form a united front. And with Greenland at the center of global attention, Denmark and Canada began deepening their Arctic partnership in science, in defense, and in resource development. Now let's talk about why Greenland matters so much. Beneath the ice lie vast deposits of rare earth metals, uranium, and critical minerals essential for modern technology. In a world where the U.S. is heavily dependent on China for rare earths, Greenland represents one of the few alternatives. Whoever controls Greenland's resources holds leverage over the future of clean energy, defense technology, and the digital economy. Trump's move wasn't crazy when you look at the bigger picture. It was strategic. But it was executed so poorly, so aggressively, that instead of winning Greenland, the U.S. lost ground in the Arctic. Denmark, backed by the European Union, began asserting itself more. Canada positioned itself as the responsible neighbor. And together, they started shaping an Arctic vision that leaves the U.S. on the outside looking in. For Canada, this was a chance to finally step out of America's shadow. For decades, Washington has treated the Arctic like its own backyard. But Canada, with its vast northern territories, has always insisted it is an Arctic power too. Working with Denmark on Greenland gave Canada a seat at the table, one where America no longer calls all the shots. And here's the part the media doesn't talk about. China is watching all of this very closely. Beijing has labeled itself a near-Arctic state and has invested heavily in Greenland's mining projects. While Trump was offering to buy the whole island, Chinese companies were quietly funding infrastructure and resource development there. Denmark and Canada both know this. By strengthening their alliance, they're not just checking the US, they're also creating a united defense against Chinese encroachment in the Arctic. But Washington? Washington is scrambling. The Arctic is melting faster than ever before. new shipping routes are opening that will cut travel time between Asia and Europe dramatically. Whoever dominates those routes will dominate global trade. The US wanted to lock down Greenland as a strategic asset. Instead, it is watching as Canada and Denmark, backed by Europe, grow their influence. And as China positions itself for a long-term game, Trump's Greenland move, the one that was mocked as a joke, might go down in history as a turning point. Because instead of expanding US influence, it triggered a backlash that helped Canada and Denmark consolidate power. And the ripple effects are still being felt today. Think about what's happening. The Arctic is now one of the most militarized regions on Earth. Russia has expanded its Arctic bases. China has ships sailing through northern waters. Canada is modernizing its Arctic defenses. Denmark is strengthening its presence in Greenland. And the US? It is playing catch-up, trying to rebuild relationships it damaged when Trump's offer turned Greenland into an international scandal. Let's take a step back and imagine the Arctic as a chessboard. On one side, you have the United States, trying to secure resources and defend its northern flank. On another, you have Russia, pouring billions into Arctic infrastructure and weapons. Then comes China, the outsider, trying to sneak in through mining projects and shipping lanes. And finally, you have Canada and Denmark, two nations that once argued over rocks, now quietly building an alliance that punches far above its weight. Trump wanted Greenland to give America checkmate. Instead, his move has allowed others to advance their pieces, leaving the US vulnerable. And here's the irony. America already had influence in Greenland. Thule Air Base, operating since the Cold War, gave Washington a strategic foothold. Greenland's government worked with the US on multiple projects. America didn't need to own Greenland outright to benefit from it. But Trump's public demand, his transactional approach, insulted both Denmark and Greenland. It turned quiet cooperation into open resistance. It turned friends into skeptics. And it gave Canada the perfect chance to step forward as Denmark's reliable partner. Today, as Arctic ice recedes and resources become more accessible, Canada and Denmark are preparing for a future where they, not Washington, set the rules in the North. They are developing joint research, improving Arctic shipping oversight, and building diplomatic coalitions that present them as guardians of the Arctic environment. The US, meanwhile, is left struggling to repair the diplomatic damage while facing a strategic squeeze from both rivals and allies alike. This is about more than Trump, more than Greenland, and more than Canada and Denmark. It's about the future of the Arctic, the last great frontier of the Earth. A frontier rich in minerals, vital for trade, and critical for global security. A frontier where America once assumed it had the upper hand, but where today it is facing a new reality. The question now is simple. Can the United States recover from its Greenland blunder? Or has Trump's failed move permanently shifted the Arctic game toward Canada, Denmark, and other players waiting to seize the advantage? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain. The Arctic is no longer America's playground, and the consequences of that shift will shape the 21st century. This has been Traveling Vibes. Don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth explorations of global power struggles and how they impact America's future.